story, so we figured it out. Good. First of all, thank you very much for coming. As you know, we do the speaker series most Thursdays, and we've had a lot of great athletes around Boulder so far. Obviously, tonight we're honored to have In Motion's very own Mark Plaatjes. Obviously, among other things, obviously he and his family founded this store, obviously the rehabilitation clinic, which he operated before, obviously another retail store across town. We're here tonight to celebrate his 1993 World Championship, which is still amazing. There have been a lot of great performances in American running and running in general, but no one else has won a gold medal. And to win a gold medal, obviously, certainly of all the athletes that have been into this town, it's a really cool thing. So let's get started. So you've been here 30 years. You've been involved in the community as a runner, an elite athlete, as a business owner, a physical therapist, a coach, a retailer. During that 30 years, I guess, what's the biggest thing that resonates about Boulder, and kind of maybe, you know, what brought you here in the first place?
The biggest thing that resonates for me about Boulder are the people. The running community is a pretty amazing community. When myself and my family first came to Boulder, we knew nobody, and people like Steve Bosley, who's in the crowd here. Steve didn't know us from Adam. He gave us a car to drive around. He helped us get an apartment. And the rest of the runners, Steve Jones was here, Arturo Barrios was here, Rosa Mota, Ingrid Christensen, and they all just really welcomed us. And they, like I said, they didn't know us from a bar of soap, and they opened their arms to us and they just welcomed us. And it was this really close-knit community, and it just was so amazing because when we'd have a Sunday long run, there'd be 15 different nationalities represented at the long run, and we'd have 30 people. My wife Shirley would make pancakes, and we'd have coffee after our run. But there'd be 30 people on a Sunday long run, and amongst those 30 people, there were probably world champions and Olympic champions, and everybody trained together. And we socialized together, we helped each other. When one person, that's the beauty of training in a group, when one person is down, the other person is up, and vice versa. So it's really the support and how the Boulder community made us feel like a family that has really been the best part for me.
And certainly that community, you spoke a lot in the last 9 months since you opened the store here, wanting to get back into retail largely for the community aspect and helping other runners. Certainly that was present back then, and it's certainly present now. But talk about that relative to the store. I mean, you were successful as a PT and everything else, and didn't necessarily have to do this at all, and you wanted to. But the serving of runners and helping them fit shoes and helping them fit is part of the reason you did it.
Yeah, it's you guys all know, and when I look around the room here and I look at people that we see them every week, and we're slowly starting to build community, and you guys start recognizing the other people that are coming, and that's how we build community, and hopefully we get this bigger. And because one of the saddest things for me when I was not a willing participant in the sale of Boulder Running Company was the loss of the community that we had fostered. And so, I had a non-compete that I had to do, and once that was done, it was always on the forefront of my mind that I wanted to do this again. I didn't need to, as Brian was saying, but I wanted to because it's what I miss the most. I miss the running community. I see people in my clinic all the time, but it's a different interaction when you're out on the floor. You interact differently. So that's what I miss, and that's what I wanted to have back.
It's not quite as painful out here when you're out here as because you aren't there. And if you're laughing, you've been back there. So a lot of you know some of Mark's story, but let's take it back. Obviously, you grew up in South Africa, and you grew up in Johannesburg, and you were a very good runner as a kid. Obviously, at that time, though, there was apartheid, and you were the country was forbidden to participate in international competition. Yet you were still a very up-and-coming runner, one of the top marathoners in the world at that time. Maybe take us back to maybe how you started running. There's a funny story you said yesterday about how you started running, and then kind of go forward from there.
So in South Africa, they choose, when you get to high school, they choose the athletic teams very differently than you guys do here. So they take the entire school body and they divide them into 3 houses. And then every individual has to choose an event. So when I got to high school, I decided that I was a sprinter. So I went out for the 100 meters. And I ended up winning the inter-house competition. And the top 3 people in each event got to represent the school. So when I won the inter-house competition, and then we got to our first meet against some big schools, made the final of the 100, and in the final, gun went off, and by the time I brought my head up at about 20 meters and looked up, and those guys were already at 80 meters, and I was stone last. And of course, I'm in high school, I'm a freshman, totally embarrassing, so I was like, I am not doing that ever again. So for my sophomore year, my junior year, and my senior year, I decided to do events that I knew I'd never make it in the top 3. So the following year I did shot put. The following year, in my junior year, I did javelin. In my senior year, I did high jump. The scary thing was I almost made the high jump. I finished 4th. But I didn't make the top 3, so I didn't get to represent the school. And so in my senior year, I had already, I come from a family of 10 children. My family couldn't afford for me to go to college. And so I had a job lined up as a bank clerk. So I was going to work as a bank clerk. And in my senior year, I was at the track meet that I got dropped in the 100. And one of the teachers came on the public announcing system and said, is there anybody in the audience who would be willing to help? There were 3 kids in the boys' 3,000 meters. And the teacher asked if there was anyone that was willing to help them through half a mile and a mile so that they could qualify for state, because there were only 3 kids and they wanted to help, some help with pacing. And so, of course it's high school, nobody volunteers. And to this day, I can't tell you why, but I looked over to my friend and I said, why don't we go help those kids? I said, you run the 800, I'll run the mile. And so he looked at me like, he's like, what are you talking about? I said, come on, we can run, you can run half mile, I'll do the mile. So we went down, volunteered, borrowed some shorts, borrowed some shoes, and we started running. And the gun went off. My buddy was in the lead, I was second, and the 3 guys were behind us. He took them through the 800 meters and he stopped, and I took over, took them through the mile, and then I stopped. And when I stopped, I looked back and they were about 20 meters behind me. So I was like, yeah, I feel good. I'll jump back into the race and help them some more. And as soon as they catch me, then I'll drop out. Well, if you know 3,000 meters after a mile, there's only 3.5 laps left. And so I kept running and they never caught me. And so I qualified for state, and so did they. And then the teacher asked me if I wanted to be on the team. And so I had a month left to state, and so I trained with the team for a month. Went to state and won state, and then 3 weeks later went to nationals and I won nationals. And thank you. The reason why that is such a pivotal point in my life is that after that I got a scholarship offer to go run at university, and so I didn't have to become a bank clerk and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So I don't know to this day what made me say, let's go help those kids, but that's what happened, and here we are.
So you could have been a 105-pound shot putter, right?
That's right.
Or a distance runner, which
That's right. Or a high jumper.
I guess made sense, right?
That's right.
So yeah, part of that was you went to the University of Georgia, and so you left South Africa and temporarily apartheid and everything else behind, and you came to Georgia, and that's obviously the American South, which had its own problems with racial discrimination. But tell us what you found there. You were in Athens, Georgia for a couple of years, 3 years. I know you were hurt a little bit, you said, but then you ran all over the Southeastern Conference. What was that like?
So, a lot of people, when they found out that, I was going to Georgia, it was like, why are you going to the South? It's just the same as South Africa. But, that wasn't my experience. Athens is really like Boulder is in Colorado. It's a small liberal college town. And I never experienced any racism or prejudice at all while I was in Athens. And Benji Durden is also a Boulder Bulldog alumnus over there. And so when I got to Georgia, I was chasing all Benji's records in the 5K and 10K. But I had a wonderful experience in Athens. I got hurt for the first few seasons because I came from a Lydiard-based training method, and when we got to Georgia, the coach put me on the track 3 times a week, and so I got hurt every season. I got hurt, and so I went to the coach and I said, listen, you brought me here to score points for the school. If you are willing, I would like to experiment with something. I said, if you let me do the training I know works, and if I start winning races, I don't care if you take the credit. So he said, okay, I give you 3 months. And he gave me 3 months to do the training that I knew. And so I started doing that, and I won SEC championships in cross country, and won the 5K and the 10K at SEC. And then he started letting the whole team train with me, the distance team. And so the whole distance team was doing Lydiard-based training, and we got off the track 3 times a week. And we didn't get hurt.
That's a good story.
No, it was John, Coach Gainey, Louis Gainey. Yes.
He was the assistant, I was respected.
Yeah, he became the head coach after Benji left.
Did you break Benji's records or not?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Ben. But then you're here, obviously, for 2.5, 3 years, I think you said, and then you had the college experience. You went back to South Africa, where apartheid was still in place, but you kept running. Obviously, you run, I think, sub 209 at some point when you were youngish, young 20s, right? And I guess maybe explain what that felt like after experiencing America, right, in Athens or whatever, and then you went back to your home country, and apartheid was still there, and you didn't have the opportunities. You were becoming a PT, you were becoming a professional PT, a professional marathoner, one of the best in the world, but there were limited opportunities, yeah?
Of course. So the biggest thing was, like I said, I had an amazing experience in Georgia, and then going back to South Africa. So prior to leaving to Georgia, the thing you have to understand about apartheid is that the government controlled radio, TV, newspapers, postal service. So everything that you read, heard, saw was what they wanted you to read, hear, and see. And so when I came to Georgia, it was a total eye-opener to me. And then going back to South Africa, all of a sudden I realized that when I was growing up in South Africa, I didn't think anything was wrong. And then when I got to Georgia, there was a lot wrong with what happened at home. So it was a real eye-opener going back to South Africa. And of course, being a PT, I was telling Brian that once I qualified as a PT, I couldn't open up a PT practice and own it. I had to work under somebody else who would own the clinic, and I would work for them. I could not own a business being non-white in South Africa. So that was, again, coming back from Georgia to that was another kind of setback, and another thing that put thoughts in my head about what I wanted to do. And then when I started running after leaving Georgia, I went back to South Africa and I started running marathons, and that's when I ran 2:08 in the marathon. And at that year, I think I was ranked third in the world. And you know, we were just running against ourselves in South Africa. We couldn't compete against anybody else. And so even at that time is when we supposedly made Olympic teams, but we never could go to the Olympics because South Africa was banned from competing internationally. And then when Shirley and I had our first daughter, Janae, with apartheid being what it was and opportunities being what it was, we decided that you know, we needed something different. And we decided to come to the US on vacation. And while we were here on vacation, on our last day back, we went to dinner with a friend that somebody in South Africa asked us to visit. And we were talking, and he said, what do you do? I said, I just qualified as a physical therapist. And he goes, do you want a job? And I was like, what do you mean, do I want a job? He said, well, I work for this clinic and I've advertised this position for 5 years and I haven't been able to fill it. And so now I can hire a PT from anywhere in the world. So, you know, I haven't been able to fill it. So if you want a job, you have a job. And it was our last day in the US on vacation. And so we had to sit there and think about this offer.
Overnight, right?
Overnight. We were leaving the next day. And of course, we had no money. We had spent our money. It was the last day of vacation. And Shirley and I just spoke about it the whole night. We spoke about, you know, apartheid and leaving our families and the opportunities that would be available. And so we decided to stay. And that's how we started. And I started to work at the clinic, and Shirley was the adapted aquatics teacher, and I was the PT. It was a school for physically and mentally handicapped kids, and so we worked there for 3 years while we were in Chicago.
And that was in Chicago. On that vacation, you've been a bunch of other places, obviously American places like Vegas, and I think you came here too, yeah?
Yeah, we did all the tourist stuff. We did Hollywood, we did Vegas, we did the Grand Canyon, and we came to Boulder on our vacation because we wanted to see, you know, the reading Runner's World. This is where everybody came, so we wanted to see why everybody's here, and we just fell in love with it. Something that you guys might not know is that Boulder is at the same altitude as Johannesburg, where I was born. Exact same altitude, same latitude, only south. So Boulder is the same latitude that it's north. Johannesburg is the same latitude south. And so everything is very, very similar, except we don't get snow.
And we only sometimes do, right?
Yeah, just sometimes.
Except for last winter.
Yes.
So that was 1986. I think you were 24-ish or so, yeah. Starting off, but you left everything behind, right? You left family and money, everything behind, right?
Yeah, we had, you know, like I said, I was going to go back to a PT practice. Shirley was assistant manager at the bank. She had the keys to the vault with her, and so
you still have them.
Yeah. And you know, we had a house, we had cars, we had business, we had stuff established, and so we just left everything. And like I said, we had 2 suitcases and a wish.
It's pretty cool. It's really cool. So obviously that was 1986. You eventually found your way to Boulder a couple years later in '89. I guess maybe how did that happen? Then what did you find when you got here? You talked about the running community when you opened your remarks, but talk about how they welcomed you when you got here.
Yeah. So we had to stay in Chicago for 3 years because the job offer required 3 years, and so we stayed there for 3 years. And we probably would still be there today if it wasn't for the damn winter in Chicago. If anybody has spent any time in Chicago in the winter, it's just this is the tropics compared to Chicago. It was just not good. So we had to move, and during the time that those 3 years, the guy that offered me the job was gracious enough to give me time off before a big race. So like before LA Marathon, I'd come to Boulder for a month to train, and people like Benji and Paul Chrisman and Arturo and all these guys would, I slept on Paul Chrisman's floor while I was training here for a month. And then we met Richard Lark. He's a South African, and he told me, well, why are you sleeping on the floor? You can come sleep in my basement. And so, this was the Boulder running community. And so during those 3 years, I'd come for a month at a time before big races to train. And so I got to know the community before I came out in 1989. And of course, when we came out, we were already part of the community. And, like I said earlier, the Bosleys and Arturo and his wife, Joy Rochester, and Benji and Amy and Paul Chrisman and all these people just made it so welcoming to us. And that's why we wanted to be here.
I think one of the keys that you said, training-wise, that you said before, but everyone trained together back then, or at least found each other on long runs and some workouts. And at the time, with all these guys you mentioned, Arturo and Deep was still here, Jonesy, all those guys, it seemed like that excellence begat excellence, right? You guys trained harder together, but then in any given year, you guys were out winning races and marathons all over the place. And Jonesy won a bunch, Deep won, you won LA, Columbus. I mean, that must have been really something to have all these guys that from different countries, different shoe brands and all that stuff, training together and going out around the world and winning all these things.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that I find that some of the young people in Boulder are missing, is that we train together, we socialize together. There was no secrets. We helped each other. So, for example, if we got to the track on a Friday morning, which is when most people got to the track, and pots used to be open, and the whole community used to be at pots on a Friday and a Tuesday. But you'd get there, and for example, if I had 8 by 1K to do, and Arturo had 5 by 1 mile, and Jonesy had 6 by 1200, we'd kind of talk about what our goals were for the workout, and we'd come up with a workout that we'd all gain something out of, and we'd do it together. Because whether you do a 1200 or a 1600 or a 1K is really not that. It's what you're trying to get out of the workout. So if you help each other and work together, when you have 20 people doing a workout and you alternating the lead, that workout becomes really easy. If you just have to lead one of them, it really makes a huge difference. If you haven't run in a group and done a hard workout, it's just amazing, because the synergy and the energy of the group really does make a significant difference. There's a good reason why the Japanese and the Kenyans and the Romanians, all these countries that train in teams, that's why they're so successful, because that group synergy is like nothing else. It doesn't mean that you're not going to toe the line and beat the crap out of your training partner. I'll tell you guys a story. There was a guy, his name was Brian Sheriff. He was from Zimbabwe. So Brian and I, Brian was part of the group. We went to the Old Kent Riverbank 25K. So pretty quickly after about 2K, Brian and I separated and we were by ourselves. So with a mile, we get to the last mile, and all of a sudden Brian pulls over and starts vomiting, right? So he's my buddy, he's my training partner, right? So I stop and I wait for him and I ask, are you okay? He wipes his mouth off, he gathers himself, and we start running again. So we get to the finish, and we had to go around this promenade, and there was a big, huge round container, and if you went this way around the container, you'd get like 2 steps on the guy that went to the inside. So we get to this container, and there's 100 meters left after you go around this big container. So Brian and I get there together. He elbows me to the outside. This guy that I just stopped for elbows me to the outside, so I have to go around the drum, and so he beats me by I'm just behind him, he beats me by a neck. And there was, $10,000 difference between first and second. So I get, after the race, I go to Brian, I go, what the hell, dude? He goes, I said, I stopped for you. He goes, did I ask you? You know what he said? He said, it's a competition, dude. I didn't ask you to stop. So there you go. That's what we can train together and we can help each other, but when we get to a race, it's every man for himself. Needless to say, Brian never beat me again after that. Not one time.
That's a great story. So rolling into the 90s, obviously all these guys were going to World Championships and Olympics. Obviously you still couldn't. But then while you're here in 1992, apartheid is lifted, right? Talk about the confusion that maybe set off relative to, did you have a chance in 92 to run for South Africa? Did you want to? Or was there a chance to run for the US? How did 92 play out?
So 92 was a really frustrating and emotional year for me because I was really at my peak in 1992. And the IAAF had decided to have a meeting about allowing South Africa back into the international athletic community because apartheid had ended. And so they were supposed to hold a meeting in March, and it would be before the USA Olympic trials. And if that happened and they did allow South Africa back, that would make me eligible to compete for the US. But something happened, the IAAF postponed their meeting to after the US Olympic trials, and I was not eligible to compete for the US in 1992. However, I was eligible, because I was still South African, to compete for South Africa. But to me, I made the decision to come to the US, and I just thought that, if I go back to South Africa and represent South Africa, all the athletes that stayed there and endured apartheid and didn't leave, I thought that would be just so unfair to them for me to come back and take a spot on the team when I wasn't even in the country anymore. So even though I was invited by the South African committee, I decided that I didn't want to do that, and I would rather wait until I got a fair shot at making the US team.
And then obviously you eventually got your citizenship in 93. That was a long process, obviously, but in 93 there was a World Championship. How did your citizenship come through, and then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, was it, you wound up in the World Championship? Obviously that's a tough thing to do because you weren't a citizen prior to that.
Correct. So prior to the 1993 World Championships, I got contacted by USA Track and Field, and they said that there's a pretty good chance that your US citizenship will go through before the World Championships, and it's I wanted to make that team, and they said if you go and run a qualifier, you can make the team even if you get your citizenship the week before. So I had to decide where I wanted to run, and the first race we ended up going to was Houston in January, and myself, Ed Eystone, and Paul Pilkington decided to run together to try and get a qualifier. We were all trying to make the team, and when we got to Houston, there was a 20-mile-per-hour headwind, and so we decided to try anyway, and we were the three of us went at pace for the first 10 miles, and we just realized that it was a futile attempt, so they backed it off, and so we just ended up jogging the rest of the race in Houston because we weren't going to get the time. And yes.
What was your time?
2:13.
Just jogging.
Just jogging.
Yeah.
Just jogging.
At that time, it was a jog, really. And so. And Benji can relate to this. Benji, thank you. So when
You've run that pace to 10 miles, 22:13, you just slow down a lot.
yeah, it really is very comfortable.
It's hard for us to run that level. You think of it as because we just kind of just active.
right?
I think Bob was speaking for the rest of us. So.
You have a question? You okay?
No, okay.
Okay. So the next race that I was able to qualify was Boston. And because there was so little time between Boston being in April and the championships in August, I decided that I was going to just put out as much as I needed to make the team. And the fastest guy that I had to beat to make the team had run 2:12:45, and so I had to beat 2:12:45. So I decided I was going to just try and nip it, like run 2:12:41 or something. And so I decided to start in the third pack. So at Boston you have a pacer for 2:13, 2:12, 2:10, 2:08. So I decided to go with the third pack and ran in the third pack until we got to halfway. And after halfway, I was feeling so comfortable. I said, okay, I'll go to the second pack. So I moved up to the second pack and got to Heartbreak. And I think I was in 26th position. And once you're done with Heartbreak, you've got basically you have 10K left. And I felt really good. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use the last 10K as a time trial. So I ran 30:29 for the last 10K and went from 26th to 6th place and ran 2:12:39 and made the team. So that was how I got to the World Champs.
So that was in April. You qualified and ran a qualifying time, and then you got your citizenship later that spring or late spring, right?
Yep, I received word from the immigration that my green card was approved and I could apply for my citizenship was approved, and we got it in July of 1993, and World Champs was a month later. And fortunately for me, that the U.S. Track officials had told me to get the qualifier prior to getting citizenship. So that's how it worked out.
So you want to run a team for the World Championships, which were in Stuttgart, Germany. As any international championship racer, there was a deep field from around the world, obviously. But what was it like, I guess, for you to be wearing USA for the first time? I mean, obviously, growing up in South Africa under apartheid, you were one of the world's greatest marathoners, but couldn't compete except for nationally. Yeah. But then finally, you step on this world stage for the first time and have USA across your chest. What's that like going into that race?
So every athlete in here will tell you, your biggest goal as an athlete is to be able to compete against the best in whatever event you're doing, to compete against the best in the world. And it doesn't matter what level it is, you really want to compete against the best, and whether you win or lose, you want that opportunity. And so when I made the US team, it was just so amazing, and I was so ecstatic that it really gave me so much, I can't even explain it. My training just ramped up to a different level. Steve Jones was probably the guy that I ran with the most at that time, and he'll tell you that the training was it really just took another notch when I found out I made the team. It just gave me something that I was missing, and wearing a national uniform and getting the opportunity to compete against the best in the world was really all I was looking for all this time while I was competing in South Africa. And getting that opportunity was just the most amazing dream come true for me.
And so the race starts, obviously. As any racers, there's different tactics and different strategies from runners and everything else. But I think eventually after halfway is when Lucas Swartboy from Namibia went out and pushed the pace and everything else and kind of strung runners along. Where were you in the race at that point, and kind of how did it play out for the next 10 miles or so?
So the race started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was 80 degrees and 90% humidity. So it started very slow. We were running 5:10, 5:15 through halfway, and then we got to 25K, and Lucas Swartboy from Namibia dropped it from 5:15. He ran 4:36 the next mile, and just splintered the group, and five guys went with him. And normally I would go with him. I would have gone with him because I like to be in the mix of a race. I like to be part of it. But something in my head just said, it's too hot, it's too early, and the injection of pace was just too quick. So I even though I was feeling really good, I decided to hold back, and the 5 guys went with him. So Luquetz dropped another 4:30 after that, 4:36. He ran 4:31 and just splintered the group behind him. So I was in the second pack, and I was watching them, and they just, the 4 guys that was behind him just started coming back towards us. So at 28K, I decided, okay, it's time to make a move. So I caught number 5 at 28K. I caught number 4 at just after 29K. I caught number 3 at 30K. And so at this stage, I'm already happy because now I'm in bronze medal position, and I look behind and people are going backwards. So I'm just pretty safe bronze. So I was just totally relaxed. I was happy. Then I caught the silver medal. I caught second place at 32K. And so now I'm in second place, and now I've got an even bigger smile on my face. And I'm just totally just running and relaxed. And I get to 32K and pass Kim Jae-yong from Korea, passed him at 32K. And at 32K, Steve Jones, Kim Jones's husband, was standing on the side of a road, and he said, Luquetz has got 2 minutes on you. Yes.
Make sure that you know that's not Steve Jones.
Yes, not Steve Jones, the world record holder. This was Kim Jones, the American record holder at the time. This was her husband, different guy. So he was standing there, and he goes, "You have 2 minutes. He has 2 minutes on you at this point." So I didn't pay attention. I was 2 minutes. I'm never going to catch the guy. So I was already happy. Big smile on my face. Was just running. And so the way out to halfway was gradual uphill, and then so coming back was a gradual downhill. So I was just flying, and we came back into the city, and around about 40K, and I came around this big roundabout, and as I came around the roundabout, I looked up, and Luquetz was half a mile down the road. I was like, holy cow. He's right there. So, and he wasn't looking good. So I was like, okay, look back again just to make sure there was nobody coming. I was like, okay, I gotta go get him. So I picked it up again, and I came up behind him. And it's funny, I was telling these guys, it's amazing the things that go on in your head. Luquetz, if you guys don't know the history about this guy, he had just lost New York City Marathon and Boston Marathon in the last mile, got out sprinted by somebody else. So we got, twice in the 2 races prior to the world champs. At the Boston that I was 6th, he was 2nd, okay? And this is going through my head, and I'm going to do this to this guy again, okay? So I was like, I was like, he's young, he's going to get other opportunities. So I'm talking to myself while I'm coming up against the guy. So I was like, okay, I gotta go. And I just hammered past him. And the one other thing that was in my head as I was coming up, and I was thinking that I was like, there's a Mercedes for first place. I gotta go. So I passed him, and so I passed him right outside the stadium. We got into the tunnel, and so it's completely dark, you hear nothing. And then you come out of the tunnel, and there's 35,000 people in the stadium screaming, and the sun is bright, and so it's just such a contrast in senses. And of course, Luquetz woke up when I came past him, so he's not that far behind me. Okay, so we're running down, and I'm approaching where the finish line should be. And I come to that point and I look around, there's no official, there's no tape for me to break, nothing. And so the picture that you see of me winning the world champs,
The logo of the store here.
yeah, if you look at my face, it's not a happy face. The picture, if you look at the picture, I'm actually saying, where's the finish line? Like this, okay? I wasn't a happy face. And so I ran past the finish line and I just kept going. I kept going, and that 300 meters was the fastest 300 meters of the entire race, because he was just over here. He was just 9 seconds behind me. And so finally, when I got to the far straight, German official told me to stop, and the race was done. So then I was finally able to start celebrating.
So you ran like a 26.5 mile marathon.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, what a story. That's a great story. And obviously, amazing to win, but even with that confusion, you must have been out of this world. I mean, obviously, you've been happy with bronze, happy with silver, but then you won that in that way. I mean, that's amazing. How'd that feel?
And it was really funny, because the American television, if you look at any of the coverage, they only have the last mile, because they packed up. CBS packed up. They was like, there's no US that's going to do anything here. And so when they started seeing me on the coverage from the Canadian television, they had to rush back and catch the last mile. So if you go on YouTube, all you see is the last half mile of the entire race. But just the whole thing after the race, I was unfortunately for me, Shirley and Janae was not there, and I was there by myself. But again, the running community being what it was, the Runners World put on a huge party for me in Stuttgart, and of course the people from Mercedes presented the car, and they gave a party for me as well. So it was just the most amazing experience ever, and yeah, just being able to represent the US and win the gold medal was just the ultimate dream.
I still get chills. I think it's so exciting. And I moved here in August of 1993, and kind of realized what was happening. And then I know there was a Boulder Roadrunners party or something like that, or a celebration somewhere, and you came back into town, and you had earned your spot. Like all these other guys, Arturo and all these guys, had gone all around the world and win races or whatever else, and now you're a world champion. Yeah. So maybe talk about, I think you told us yesterday how that changed kind of your life as an athlete and how your life in general. You were still here, you were a PT and everything else, but you now got to go everywhere, right?
Yeah, one of the best things about winning a race like that is that it really provides you with so many opportunities. I got to, Shirley and I got to go to Japan, we got to go to Korea. You go to all these amazing places because you're the world champion, and people pay you money to come and just say hi at these races. You get huge endorsement contracts. I signed a contract with Mizuno. I had a contract with Tag Heuer. I had a contract with the sunglass company, even though I don't wear sunglasses. SunCloud pay me money to wear sunglasses, even though I don't wear sunglasses. But these are the things that happen when you win something like that. And so we just opened up a lot of doors as far as that goes, and the opportunities to visit these amazing places all around the world and meet, the amazing running community that exists all around the world. So that was the best part of it for me.
And certainly it established you, aside from time, it established you as one of the world greats, right? To win a championship, not many people win championships in their career. You can run fast times, a lot of people run fast times. To win a championship certainly puts you in the history books, and that's what's really cool. And yet, obviously, you continue to run and to race and to be part of this community the whole time, and it didn't really change you at all, it seemed.
I hope not. It's, the community, like I said, there were so many people that lived and still are that live in Boulder that are just amazing. And I mean, how many times, I was just thinking of 3 weeks ago when we had our talk here, we had Benji, we had Steve Jones, I think we had Don Janicki. We had so many people that have run so many amazing races and made Olympic teams. And it's just it makes you really humble to be in Boulder and it's part of what is the amazing thing about this little town.
And I absolutely agree with that. And as a track nerd and a running nerd, I came here and I was like, oh, I would go to the track and I'd see all these different nationalities, and then I'd point out to myself, oh, there's Rolando, there's Arturo, and that was cool. And I think that's still very cool because we can still see these athletes in our presence, you know, Jenny and Emma and whoever's training here. But I think what's really cool is that this town has a citizenship that is inspired, right? That's motivated, and they might not all be winning or even running fast marathons, but they're all doing something, right? And we're all here today for that. I think that's where the connection is between the elites from long ago and the elites right now and everyone else. And that's maybe where it's all tied together right here too. That's what community is, yeah?
Absolutely. And all you guys are part of it, and it makes it really special.
And so you were back here, you were a PT, you continued racing for a handful of years, eventually decided to retire, but also got into running retail. And again, I think one of the times I first interviewed you, you were saying that as a PT, you were, you know, what I now call a body whisperer, a running whisperer, because you understand the human body. And back then, so many podiatrists or regular physicians didn't understand running, right? And so to find somebody, a PT, who understood running, obviously was a great thing, but also to be able to understand the connection between the runner, the running shoe, and how they run wasn't really happening much then. And certainly that's what motivated you and you and Johnny to go into business and start the business. And maybe talk about that briefly.
Yeah. When I was in Boulder working at a clinic, it wasn't my clinic, it was RPT Associates, and it was an amazing setup for me because I could work and then leave, and I didn't have to worry about anything else. I could take time off before a major race and train properly for it. So the setup worked really well. But when I was in the PT clinic, we were doing gait analysis on the treadmill, and I kept sending my patients to the local running stores to get shoes, and they kept coming back with either the wrong shoes or they just got bad customer service. And so when Johnny, my old partner, came from South Africa, and Johnny used to own running stores in South Africa, I told him my idea. I said, you know, I think we should do gait analysis in the retail store, so when somebody comes and puts on a pair of shoes, they can actually see, when you slow it down, how the shoe works for them, instead of me saying, oh, that looks great, and you don't get to see it. Whereas if we can record it and play it back, you can actually see that the shoe, that I'm not just making things up. And so that was the impetus for starting Boulder Running Company in 1995.
And back then, that was a tiny little slice of a retail shop, obviously, but you grew that based on, I think, people, you know, before there was other running stores here, but you guys were offering this unique service, unique fitting service, which obviously you're offering here, obviously. Yeah. And I know people used to come in from the suburbs, or what I call them around here, Louisville, Lafayette, and everything else as far away as Denver, to come here on weekends, and you come here on weekends and you see people from all over, but, you know, really gravitating toward that service.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it was a huge thing, and now everybody does it. But in the last few years, for example, when I left running retail in 6 years ago now, the percentage of support shoes was 80% and 20% neutral. It is totally flipped. Right now, other than here, if you go to a run specialty store, the percentages are 80% neutral and 20% support. And to me, I look at it and go, did something happen in the last 6 years that people's feet changed? And that all of a sudden nobody needs support? But that fact is not true, because my running related injury business went up 30% in that time period. When everybody went from wearing supportive shoes to wearing non-supportive shoes, and you know, the whole minimalist thing. The reason why the minimalist thing is not even around anymore is because people got hurt, and people weren't ready to take the time to take a year to get ready to wear a pair of Vibrams. People wanted to buy it and go run 10 miles. So what happened? We got stress fractures, we got Achilles ruptures, we got plantar fasciitis ruptures. And it wasn't just my business that went up. If you speak to podiatrists and orthopedists, all of them have experienced the same thing. So I just feel like people have gone away from looking at mechanics, and that was another impetus why I wanted to get back into doing this, because it doesn't matter, whether it's 6 years ago or now, people's mechanics are still the same. It has not changed. And a lot of people still need support, whether they like it or not.
And for better or for worse, sometimes you need physical therapy work, right?
Yeah.
And I have two funny stories about that. One, the first day I met Mark, I brought in a friend of mine who had torn her ACL. You remember the story?
Yes.
Over on Alpine, right?
Yeah.
And I was in the waiting room waiting for her, and you were going to do some PT on her, she walked in, and her leg was stiff and everything else, and you just took it and you jammed it back, and she screamed so loud that everyone, including me, like freaked out in the waiting room. But obviously, the point is his style is pretty acute, right?
I think most of the people in the room have
and that's why we're laughing, right? My other story is I did this stupid thing. I ran from Winter Park to Boulder, and then like 2 days later I come in and there's I'm all hurt, I can't walk and everything else, and he's it's a piriformis, and so I'm lying face down on the table over there, right, and he's working my piriformis, and you know how it goes, like after the first session of it, like the first 30 seconds, 90 seconds, it starts to hurt, and he comes back in and it's like, it's like right on fire, right? So after whatever, 3 minutes of work, I'm just like, I thought an alien's gonna come out of my hip, right? And if you remember the old setup over there, there was always shoe boxes everywhere and everything else, and I literally was on the table, like pulling into the metal braces and everything else, like in pain and sweating and almost tears. And he's just doing his thing. He's this 120-pound guy with a thumb that's like hydraulic, right? So I look to the right, and there's all these Brooks running shoe boxes stacked up. It's like and if you know what I'm talking about. Like 30 times next to me, it says "Run Happy" with a little smiley face, I'm like, So that's my experience with Mark. One of the experiences with Mark. I guess a couple things. We're going to wrap up here, but we're going to two things. One, we didn't have any beer tonight because we talked to the city, and the city said we shouldn't have it. But we'll get back to that in a couple weeks.
We got the letter of admonition that we were in violation of liquor laws.
So we'll pause on that for a bit. We'll get back in compliance.
We'll figure it out.
Get in compliance with all that. So sorry there's no beer here. We are going to continue this celebration over at Twisted Pine in the back room. If you guys want to join, you're all welcome. The beer's on us, and beer's on us, right?
Yes.
And
yes. First round is on us.
One beer's on us. Anyway, so that'll start after we walk over there. I guess maybe the last thing is, here you are, you're 9 months into the store, and you're back to helping people. I think you said last fall before it opened, you felt like you were at mile 20 of a marathon and got cut off and couldn't finish it. And now, you've got this last stretch, and I'm not pushing you to retirement by any means, but like, how does it feel to be back on that course and serving people and being part of this business?
Absolutely. It's, I'm in my happy place again. I really missed the retail part, because it's a total different interaction than in the clinic. And it was just a really good balance for me. I always, for 25 years, I worked 2 days in the store, 4 days in the clinic. And it just provided me with a really good balance. And it made me happy. And now I'm happy. And so now we're in the 0.2 stretch of the marathon, and we're going to see where it goes.
Right on. Congratulations on that. Anyone have any questions for Mark?
How much did it cost to get the Mercedes over here?
Nothing. They paid for it. Mercedes, obviously, I don't know if you guys know, but Stuttgart is the headquarters for Mercedes and Porsche. So if you're a car nut, it's like the city to go to. And the Mercedes people paid for the car. I got to pick everything, colors, engine, everything. So it was a pretty cool experience.
You could have been a shot putter, though.
Sorry?
You could have been a shot putter.
I could have been a shot putter.
In the back.
Yeah, one's a statement, one's a question. So just the statement is, I didn't know anything until yesterday about South Africa giving you the opportunity to run the Olympics in '92, and you actually turning it down. There aren't too many people in this whole wide world who would be given an Olympic spot would turn it down because they made a decision to live here for 6 years for a better life, and then obviously going to the World Championship. So that was amazing to me. That's my statement that everyone should acknowledge. That shows I'm going to ask you to tell a story about you and your brother sitting there seeing an advertisement in the paper about a 56 kilometre race.
So my oldest brother kind of raised me as his child. He's 20 years older than me, and when I was 5 years old, you know, like I told you guys earlier, I come from a family of 10 kids. So there were 6 boys in one room, 4 girls in one room, and my mom and my dad in the other room. So my oldest brother got married, and he had a 1-bedroom apartment, and so I was sharing a bunk bed with my 2 other brothers, and I was 5 years old, and I decided I had enough of that crap. So I packed whatever little clothing I had and hiked down to my brother's single-bedroom apartment and presented myself at his door. And so his wife and him, unbeknownst to me, his wife couldn't have children, and so they raised me as their child. And so Ralph was always he was always very motivated, and he always wanted the best for me. And so when I started running, and he found out that I had this talent to run, after I had my high school experience, there was a period of time before I got to Georgia, so I was running road races. And so one Sunday we're sitting at the breakfast table, and we reading the newspaper, and in the sports section there was an ad for a race that was about to happen, and the race was 56 kilometers, and there was a 10,000 rand prize for first place. And of course when I started running, I had won everything. I hadn't lost the race yet, but the furthest I'd run was 3K. Okay, so my brother sees this ad for this race, and he goes, "We are training for the Johannesburg Stock Exchange 56K." So he decided he was going to be my coach. So the first day of training, he gave me a backpack, filled it with 10 pounds of sand, gave me a pair of boots, you know, the steel cap boots that people use for construction, gave me a pair of those boots, said put it on, put me in the car, drove me out 18 miles, and dropped me off and said, "Run home." Yep, so I did, and needless to say, I couldn't walk for 3 days after that. So after a week of this training, I decided this was not the way to go. So I walked over to our local running store. It was called the Sweatshop, and walked in there and started talking to the guys, and I was asking, so how do you guys train for 56 kilometers? And one of the guys said, you should get this book. And the book was The Lydiard Way. So I spent the next few days reading The Lydiard Way, and I started training the Lydiard Way. And so I got ready for this 56K. And that's when I met Johnny. So we're on the starting line. I'm 16 years old. The furthest I'd run was 3K, but now I thought I trained for this 56K, and so I'm on the starting line, and I'm in the front, and Johnny walks up to me. Johnny was the best runner at the time. He looks over at me. I'm in my Jack Purcell sneakers, and lining up in the front. And Johnny looks over at me and he goes, "I think you should go back a little bit. This is for the elite runners." And I looked over him and I go, "Why?" He said, "Because you're not an elite runner." I go, "Well, I'm here to win the race." And he just kind of looked at me, and I was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" So anyway, the gun went off, and I went with him. I went to Johnny was the lead runner. I went with him. And I lasted 18 miles in my Jack Purcell sneakers. And at that time, I looked down, and my whole shoe was red, total bloody. You just keep going. And so I ended up 15th, and I won the junior prize, the first junior prize. In South Africa, under 16 and under is considered a junior. So I won the first junior prize, and the first prize for juniors was an Adidas full tracksuit and a pair of Nike Zoom Elite waffle races. So that was enough incentive for me. that was my first prize that I won, and that's what got me going. I think I ran 3 hours and 28 minutes for the 56K.
Another good source of better than $10,000, right? You had running shoes.
I had the Nike, and I think that was the first or second year that Nike was out.
Yeah. Who else had a question? Anyone?
I was just wondering, in the early 90s, when you're training with all these fast people, are you like, hey, I'm going to LA, stay home? Or is it like, well, I'll go over to Houston? Or did you ever separate, like, I'm going to go to LA, so don't come?
We didn't. It was all dependent on your ranking and how much they were paying you. At that time, Mr. Bosley over there would at that time it was called the TAC Fund, the USA Track and Field TAC Fund, and Steve was the administrator of the TAC Fund. And what the TAC Fund was, when we won prize money, we had to put it in the TAC Fund. And we couldn't accept it, otherwise we'd be professionals. And so when you had an expense, so for example, if I bought a ticket to go to a race and I paid for my hotel room, I had to come to Mr. Bosley with my receipt for the airline ticket and the hotel room, and he would reimburse me for my expenses out of my TAC fund. So that's how it worked back then. But we didn't, if you and I Steve Jones and I happened to be in a race, that's just how it was. But one year, I think we won New York, Chicago, Twin Cities, Columbus, Gold Coast, and Fukuoka out of the group that was training here in Boulder in that same year.
That's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Who else has a question for Mark?
All right.
Not at all? All right.
Guys, thank you so much for coming and making this. I appreciate it. Thank you.